Imagine a world with no PlayStation 5 sitting under your television, no Spider-Man swinging through the city in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and absolutely no iconic Sony cameras capturing our most breathtaking memories. Sounds totally impossible, right? Like some weird dark alternate timeline where technology just stopped evolving. Well, what if I told you that the tech giant we all worship today, the very company that basically defined our childhoods and modern entertainment, was once just weeks away from a total soul-crushing financial collapse? It's true. Behind that sleek minimalist logo lies a hidden history filled with massive gambles, humiliating failures, and a literal identity crisis that almost wiped them off the map forever. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar empire that was on the verge of becoming nothing more than a footnote in a history book. Let's dive straight into the terrifying moment that sent ripples of pure fear through the global market. The year was 2003, and the event was so cataclysmic that it earned its own haunting name in the business world, the Sony shock. And imagine waking up on a Monday morning to find that one of the most trusted brands on the planet just lost 25% of its entire value over a single weekend. Over 2 days of market carnage, Sony's stock plummeted, wiping out billions of dollars in market cap faster than anyone thought possible. Investors weren't just nervous, they were screaming for the exits, convinced the Sony dream was dead. Was it the end of an era? Analysts were already drafting Sony's obituary, wondering how the kings of the living room had lost their crown so fast. The world was watching the slow-motion car crash of a titan, and it was brutal. But to understand how they hit rock bottom, we have to travel back in time to a place that looks nothing like a high-tech laboratory. Would you believe me if I said Sony actually started in a bombed-out department store making burnt rice? Seriously, after World War II, Japan was in ruins, and founders Masaru Ibuka and Akio Morita were just two guys with a big dream in a tiny dusty workshop in Tokyo. Their first big invention wasn't a sleek gadget, it was an electric rice cooker made of wooden electrodes. Spoiler alert, it was a total disaster. It either undercooked the rice into a soggy mess or burned it into a black, inedible char. It was a humble, slightly embarrassing beginning that the corporate giants today don't want you to focus on. But that failed rice cooker taught them a vital lesson about innovation and resilience that would change the world forever. Before the darkness of the 2000s, there was a golden age that made Sony feel absolutely invincible. During the 70s and 80s, they were the undisputed kings of cool. They were the Apple before Apple even existed. With the legendary Trinitron TV, they owned the eyeballs of every household on the planet. And then came the Walkman. The Walkman changed everything. For the first time in human history, music was portable. You could take your soundtrack anywhere. Akio Morita and Masaru Ibuka became the it pair of the tech world, turning Sony into a symbol of status and futurism. They weren't just selling electronics. They were selling a lifestyle everyone wanted, but pride always comes before the fall, doesn't it? Success can be a dangerous drug, and Sony was getting very high on its own supply. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. By the time the new millennium rolled around, that golden mirage was starting to crack. The company had grown so big and so arrogant that it started to rot from the inside out. How did the world's most innovative company become a slow, clunky dinosaur overnight? It wasn't just about bad luck or new competitors like Samsung or Apple. The real disaster was brewing deep inside the boardroom. There was this toxic marriage starting to form between the people making the hardware and the people making the movies and music. The left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, and they were about to burn the whole house down. You won't believe the internal civil war that was about to explode and the identity crisis that almost turned Sony into a memory. It was a recipe for disaster that almost erased 70 years of history. The legendary duo of Akio Morita and Masaru Ibuka weren't just business partners, they were the heartbeat of Sony's creative engine. During those golden years, they functioned as the ultimate it pair of the tech world, balancing Morita's sharp marketing instincts with Ibuka's pure engineering brilliance. They weren't just selling gadgets, they were selling a dream of the future. But as the decades passed and the founders eventually stepped away from the daily grind, that iconic cool factor began to evaporate. The visionary spark that had once powered their greatest hits was being replaced by a sluggish bureaucratic fog. The company began to drift, losing the very essence that made it a household name in the first place. Was the magic gone forever? Then came a move that sent shockwaves through the traditional halls of the Tokyo headquarters. In 2005, Sony did the unthinkable. Well, they appointed Howard Stringer as the first non-Japanese CEO in the company's history. Stringer was an outsider, a Welsh-born media executive who found himself trying to steer a ship that was deeply rooted in Japanese corporate tradition. Was he the brave visionary who tried to modernize a crumbling giant, or was he just a convenient scapegoat who didn't truly understand the sacred Sony DNA? The rumors at the time were absolutely brutal. Inside the company, there was a palpable tension between the old guard and Stringer's new Western approach. While he tried to cut costs and streamline operations, many felt he was hacking away at the company's soul. This period exposed what many now call the internal civil war, and this is the truly juicy part of the story that still gets discussed in business schools today. Imagine Sony's different departments: Sony Music, Sony Pictures, and Sony Electronics, operating like rival kingdoms that absolutely hated each other. They weren't sharing secrets or helping each other innovate. They were actively competing against themselves. They were sabotaging themselves. This infamous silo culture became Sony's biggest enemy. The electronics division wanted to build hardware that could play everything. But the music and movie divisions were obsessed with copyright protection and digital rights management. They were so afraid of people stealing their content that they forced the hardware team to create clunky, user-unfriendly devices that nobody actually wanted to buy. It was a house divided, and as the saying goes, a house divided cannot stand. While Sony was busy fighting these internal battles, external predators were circling the waters. Most notably, a visionary named Steve Jobs was ready to eat their lunch. Sony had basically invented portable music with the Walkman, so the digital age should have been their playground. Instead, it became their graveyard. Because of that toxic internal conflict, Sony was too scared of digital piracy to embrace the MP3 format. They stubbornly pushed their own proprietary formats like 8-track, forcing users into a digital cage. Apple saw the opening and struck with the iPod. It was sleeker, easier to use, and it played everything. The iPod effectively killed the Walkman's dominance because Sony was too stuck in its own ways to innovate. However, in the middle of all this chaos, a rebel was working in the shadows. Meet Ken Kutaragi, the man we now call the father of PlayStation. You won't believe this, but Kutaragi had to develop the original PlayStation project almost in secret. The big bosses at Sony were incredibly conservative and looked down on video games, dismissing them as toys that would tarnish the company's prestigious image. They were so against the idea that they almost fired the man. Kutaragi had to fight tooth and nail, navigating corporate politics and skepticism to prove that gaming was the future of entertainment. He was a maverick who refused to back down, eventually convincing the leadership to take a chance on a console that would change the world forever. But even with the PlayStation's rising star, the rest of Sony was still bleeding out, heading toward a moment of reckoning that would test their survival to the limit. As if the internal civil wars and the loss of the portable music crown weren't enough, Sony was about to hit its absolute rock bottom. In 2014, the world watched in horror during the infamous North Korea hacking scandal. You guys remember that, right? It was a complete and total disaster. It wasn't just about some unreleased movies like The Interview or embarrassing celebrity gossip that filled the tabloids every day. The hack exposed the raw, bleeding internal chaos of a massive company that had truly lost its way. Leaked emails showed top executives arguing like children, bad-mouthing talent, and showing a total lack of direction for the future. Sony's stock value dipped as investors panicked, and financial analysts started whispering the one word no legendary brand ever wants to hear: bankruptcy. People were genuinely wondering if Sony would even be around to see the next decade. Was this finally the end of the line for the house that Walkman built? It felt like the end of an era. But just when it looked like the lights were about to go out in Tokyo for good, a savior emerged from within the ranks. Enter Kaz Hirai, the ultimate corporate hero who stepped into the CEO role with a massive weight on his shoulders and a vision in his heart. Kaz didn't just come in with small, polite fixes. He brought a massive sledgehammer to the silo culture we talked about earlier. His one Sony strategy was a total game changer, meant to force those bickering departments to finally talk to each other and share their best technology. He had to make the kind of tough, heart-wrenching calls that make most CEOs lose sleep at night. He cut the fat. He did the unthinkable by selling off the beloved Vaio PC Wing, a brand that was once the gold standard for high-end laptops. He even spun off the TV division into a separate entity. Was he a genius or just totally desperate? Well, Looking back, it was a masterstroke of survival that saved the entire company from total ruin. Kaz realized that the world had changed forever. Sony couldn't just be a gadget company anymore. They had to transition into an experience powerhouse that sold emotions, not just plastic boxes. And boy, did it work! The PlayStation 4 wasn't just a successful console, it was a dominant force that absolutely crushed the competition. It reminded the world that Sony still knew how to make things people actually loved. But here's the real secret to their comeback that most people miss: image sensors. You might not realize it, but Sony is probably in your pocket right now. Whether you're using an iPhone or a high-end Android, there's a massive chance that the camera sensor inside was made by Sony. They stopped obsessing over the final product and started owning the technology that everyone else needed to build theirs. That's how you go from the brink of collapse to being a silent giant of the industry. They weren't just making TVs, they were making the eyes of the modern digital world. The public opinion started to shift back in their favor too. We all remember those cringe E3 moments where they seemed totally out of touch. But the redemption arc was real and powerful. Sony started listening to the fans again, focusing on incredible exclusive games and hardware that felt premium. They went from being dinosaurs to fan favorites again. But wait, is the story over? Not even close. As we look toward the future, the tech world is moving faster than ever. Now that Sony is a giant again, are they getting too comfortable? The cloud wars are upon us. And the landscape is shifting once more. With Microsoft dropping billions to buy up huge studios like Activision, the pressure is back on. Sony's model is being challenged by subscriptions. Are they prepared for this next evolution, or have they truly learned? Stay tuned, because truly no one stays on top